Guys, thank you so much for coming. So today, our first lecture, we're going to talk about organization of the body and homeostasis. We'll pretty much talk about the smallest building molecules for the body and build it up, all right? And then we'll talk about how that is all organized, all right? And then we'll talk about the characteristics of life, what living organisms have to do in order to live successfully. And then we'll talk about how, because it's a very complex organism, the human body is, it is compartmentalized, all right? And we'll talk about how that's compartmentalized and the tissues and membranes that are used for that, all right? And then we'll talk about the body planes and directional terms that will really help you in describing the position of body parts in relation to other body parts, all right? Okay, so we'll just first of all cover the basics about what the course is, anatomy and physiology. All right, so anatomy is really about the structures of the body. It talks about the physical characteristics of the body. And the reason we study anatomy and physiology together is that the structure influences the functions of those body parts. Okay, for instance, our hands, and we got fingers that have three little phalanges in them, all right? Imagine if we just had one bone from the metacarpals, which are these. We'll do these in the lab. And then we just had one bone like here. You'd only be able to do this. So the three little phalanges will help you to grasp. And so the structure is very important. We have to understand the structure so that we can understand the physiology. So they go together. And the anatomy, you could split it into different sections. Systemic anatomy is when you talk about systems. For instance, you're talking about the digestive system, which some of these systems will cover them by themselves in ANP2. All right, the respiratory system, for instance, and their functions and things like that. And then regional will be, just like the word says, it will be a specific region in the body. You know, it has certain kind of anatomy or structures in that region that are very closely related to the function of that region. And then, of course, surface anatomy. We use surface anatomy to locate internal structures. And sometimes in medicine, what they do, if they want to see the, or they want to estimate the way the organs inside look, for instance, they do what's called percussion. The doctors do that. The way they put their fingers on the top, and when they beat them like that, it makes a certain sound that will allow you to, determine whether the person is bloated or whether there's something going on in there or internal bleeding, because it makes a different sound depending on what's going on inside. All right? I don't know if any of you have ever been to the doctor's office and they do that and then they go like this. It makes a different sound. So that's surface anatomy, and it helps us to locate the deeper structures. All right? And at the end, I'll show you a diagram of the torso, which is split into, quadrants, and then we'll talk about the organs underneath it. It's very important when you're doing surgery and you're trying to get the appendix. If you go to the wrong side, tough luck, then you have to cut again on the other side. You can't say oops in medicine, so you have to really know. So we'll talk about that, and I'm going to expect you to know the structures under each of those quadrants. Okay? Because it's very important. All right? So physiology, of course, then is the functions. Okay? Is the functions, and it includes all the reactions in the body. All right? And metabolism and things like that. And this is just a kind of I like to show a lot of these pictures in there because we don't have a cadaver lab. We use the CAT and so forth. So you could actually use APR 3.0, which is a software that is related to Connect, where you can actually do virtual dissections of an actual cadaver. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in the lab. And you can use it to peel off all the layers. You can see the muscles, and you could see the deeper muscles, and then finally to the skeleton. All right? So that's a good tool to use. So there's 6 levels, all right, where we start with the chemical, which is really the molecules and the atoms. In fact, the atoms that make up the molecules. All right, that's the smallest level there is. All right, and then of course the cell is the basic and functional unit of the living organism. All right, the cell is the basic and functional unit of the organism. And then similar cells, together with some extracellular material, make up the tissues. All right, and they have a specific function. And then organ level, and I will show you some slides with examples and so forth. All right, and then of course organ. Can you name one organ in the body? Any one organ at all? The heart is an organ, yeah, and it's made up of different tissues. All right, and then of course the organ system, like the digestive system, for instance, is made up of many organs. You know, small intestine, large intestine. And things like that, and some accessory organs like the pancreas. And then finally we'll go to the organism level. And this can continue to go on to the ecosystem and the universe, and it keeps growing and growing and growing. All right? Okay, but we'll focus on the 6 levels because we are only focusing on the human body. All right? So the chemical, like I said, is the atoms that make up, you know, that make up molecules. And so, like H2O, you know, something like that. It's got these 2 atoms and, you know, making up the molecule of water. All right? And then those molecules combine to form organelles. All right? Organelles are certain specific membrane-bound structures within a cell that have a specific function. All right, and then the organelles combined together and bounded by the plasma membrane will make up the cell. All right, and each one has a nucleus, of course, that will determine the genetic makeup of that cell. All right, and then of course, excuse me, that's a cell right there from biology. So we'll go quickly through that. All right. This is just a hypothetical cell because it's just showing all the possible organelles a cell can have, like the flagella, the cilia, and so forth. Usually it will have one or the other. And then, of course, similar tissues together with some extracellular matrix that binds the cells together make up a tissue, all right, like a muscle tissue, all right. And in the body, we have 4 main tissues, which are connective tissue, right? And we've got the muscle tissue, and then we got the nervous tissue. All right, and then the final one is epithelial tissue, which lines up all our, you know, organs, and you know, the digestive system is lined up by all epithelial tissues. Our skin is epithelial tissue. The final covering of the body is epithelial tissue. And epithelial tissue is the most ubiquitous. It means it's all over the place. All right. Things like connective tissue are specialized in joints. All right. So tissues make up the organs, and these are some of the organs here showing the urinary bladder, and it's got certain tissue there. And organs like the wall of the bladder, okay, or the ureter is an organ, the kidney is an organ, all those. All right, and it's made up of different tissues. All right, and here, of course, is a cadaver, you know, and this is a colon, of course, and then that is that uterus. Not the uterus, the bladder, because it's a female. You know, the uterus is down here. This is the bladder up there. Okay, so there you go. And then, of course, these organs make up a system: digestive, nervous, you know, and respiratory, etc., etc. All right. And finally, all these systems come together to make up the organism. All right. And so, and we're going to talk about how all these systems are kind of organized in the body. All right. And this again showing the urinary system, which is made up of, it's a simple system really, the kidneys, the ureters, the bladder, and the urethra, and that's it. So those are the organs in the, and this is the whole human body, showing you all the systems really, from the nervous, respiratory, and so forth. All right. So we're going to just go quickly through these systems because we kind of know about this from the biology. Lymphatic system is closely related to the circulatory system, and it gathers excess fluid and returns to the heart. Respiratory system, we all know what that is, oxygen intake and so forth. Digestive system, breaking down particles, and then, of course, absorbing them, right? And then the integumentary system, which is the skin. The skin is the major organ of the integumentary system. In fact, the skin is the biggest organ in the body. And things like hair, nails, and so forth make up the integumentary system, the covering of the body. All right, and then, of course, the skeletal system. We'll be doing bones just in a little while in the lab, and then, of course, the muscular system, which is attached to the bones and for movement and heat production and so forth. All right. So, and then I'm going to quickly go through these organs, the systems. We're going to study them, some of these systems by themselves in ANP2, lymphatic system, the respiratory, of course, with the lungs and the trachea, okay, and then, of course, the digestive. And all these systems, the integumentary system, will cover it in ANP1. I think it's probably the 4th or so lecture, and we'll do that. And it's mostly made up of epithelial tissues. And then the skeletal system, we'll be doing bones right now in the lab. Muscular system, towards the end, the last lab will be the muscular system. All right, and we'll do that. And then more systems, the nervous, we know about that. Communication in the body and control of body functions. And the endocrine system is also another control. It controls metabolism, you know, all the reactions in the body, from production of insulin and things like that. And then cardiovascular, we all know what that is. Circulation and movement of nutrients and so forth. The urinary system, we just covered it, of course, gets rid of metabolic waste specifically. And then, of course, the reproductive systems, which are important for, producing new individuals, which will be one of the characteristics of life that we'll be talking about in a little bit. Producing new individuals is important so that species doesn't become extinct. All right. So quickly again, brush through all these. We will cover the endocrine system in the second section for the midterm too. So, and then we'll talk more about the organs that are involved in there and the functions of each of those organs. So that we'll do. Cardiovascular system, we'll do in ANP2. Urinary system, again, also ANP2. And the reproductive system, we'll do that in ANP2 as well. All right? So these are the characteristics of life now. All right? I remember at the beginning I was talking about how very complex this human body is. So it's got to be well organized. All right? It's got to be very, very well organized. Otherwise, what are some of the problems that you think might happen if the body wasn't well organized? What do you think are some of the challenges? Especially when you think about how the body conducts information from one body part to the next. It's in the form of electric currents, right? Or imagine if your home, people are wiring it and they just put wires all over the place. And then they connect a switch. You might have a switch in the bathroom that will switch on a light in the living room. You see what I'm saying? So the human body has got to be well organized for it to work. If it's not organized, then you have problems and you won't be able to successfully perform all the functions. Because right now, as you're sitting right there, there's a million reactions and things going on that you're unconscious about and you don't even know. So organization is very, very important. And then we'll talk at the end about compartmentalization, which is part of that. So these are the characteristics that an organism has to have in order for it to be successful. All right? And so all these parts are related to each other and they perform a specific function. All right? And they're connected to each other in a specific way. All right? And then, of course, metabolism, all the chemical reactions that go on in the body. For example, when you convert certain nutrients into other nutrients and so forth. All right? And get rid of all the metabolic waste and things like that. So it will entail physical change of those materials. All right? Responsiveness. You've got to be able to respond, right? To the external environment, and we'll talk about homeostasis. one of the biggest things that I talk about is if you are in a drought area, if you live in a drought area and you continue to live there, or you are in a flooded area. In fact, people who live in flooded areas, they are so resilient. They like to continue to live there. And it gets flooded every year, but those people will come back. They are not being responsive. If you want to survive, you have to be responding to whatever the environment is telling you. If the area floods all the time, it means you need to go to an area that doesn't flood all the time. Yeah, that's what it is, you know. So this is another important function that you need to have. You know, I've always wondered about those guys, but anyway. And they survive, so anyway, maybe that's the point. Growth, you gotta grow, you know. Increase in cell size, okay, which is here. Increase in cell number. So if I ever ask you to define growth, then I'll need you to point out these three things. The one will be the size. The two will be the cell number, all right? And the third one, does anybody know what the third one might be? Remember when I was talking about the tissues? I was talking about how the cells are surrounded by what? The extracellular material, right? Yeah, fluid too, but the extracellular material, this is like a matrix that holds those cells in place. So growth of that too, increase in extracellular material. That's all growth. All right. So those are the three things that I'll need you to touch on if you are talking about growth. And then development actually includes growth as well, but it is you know, the changes that occur in the body over time. All right. For instance, after conception, you have the embryo, and then you have the fetus, you know, and then you have the baby is born, and then they grow into a child. And all those are development stages, adolescent period, and then they go to adulthood, and then senescence as an old. So the changes that the organism goes through over time, and it includes growth as well. All right. And then, of course, like we said at the beginning, you've got to be able to reproduce, otherwise the species become extinct. So it could be production of new cells, if it's a single-cell organism, or production of new organism, for instance, for us, right? So got to know the characteristics of life. These are the kind of questions that I will say, describe for me the characteristics of life, you know, 5 characteristics of life, and then you can talk about that, okay? Because those are very important. And the next very important concept is homeostasis. Okay? Homeostasis, maintenance of a relatively constant internal environment. All right? It doesn't stay at, it doesn't flatline. The conditions in the body do not flatline. Like your temperature is fluctuating around the normal. All right? So that's what the 37 will be like. The normal 37 degrees C, I'm more used to the Celsius than the Fahrenheit. So 37 degrees C is the normal body temperature, and your body temperature will fluctuate around that normal. All right, it doesn't stay 37 and flat lines like that. All right. So homeostasis is those functions and reactions that go on in the body to maintain a normal level of all the variables. Anything in the body that changes in value is a variable, right? So it's kind of maintenance of a relatively constant internal environment, you know, and it fluctuates around a set point. Set point is the ideal value, all right? And everything fluctuates around it. That's why we say relatively constant, because it doesn't flatline, all right? All right. So the normal range, of course, they do fluctuate in the normal range. All right. So there you go. So there are 2 kinds of homeostatic mechanisms in the body. The first one is negative feedback. All right, where if a variable changes, and goes up, events will be set in motion that will take it down. So it's negative. It's the opposite of what's happening. And those are the mechanisms that really maintain homeostasis. All right? The other one is positive feedback. Positive feedback will exacerbate the initial change. So that means if something increased, it will continue to increase. All right? There's only a few instances in the body where positive feedback is as useful. For instance, childbirth is one. All right? And clotting is another. Because when you give birth, oxytocin will cause the muscles of the uterus to contract. And then as they contract, more oxytocin is released, more contraction until the baby is born. Clotting, it's also another cascade of reactions that occurs. And then the platelets will become more sticky and more sticky until you form a plug and then it stops. Okay, so we're going to want to really talk about negative feedback. Positive feedback enhances the initial change and it's usually harmful. Okay, and we'll talk about a few scenarios in a little bit about homeostasis and positive feedback and some of those effects. So what do you need for a homeostatic mechanism? You need something that's going to tell you what's happening in the internal or the external environment, a receptor. All right? You need something that will receive the information. All right? And then you will pass that information to the control center. The control center would be the brain. All right? That controls, because the brain has what we call the set point. Remember the set point I was talking about? Like for temperature, which is 37 degrees C. All right? So the receptor receives info and then passes on to the brain. And then the brain, what it does is it will compare the change. Okay, the change is also called a stimulus. All right? A stimulus will stimulate the receptor and the information is passed here. And then let's say your temperature goes up. It's hot and your temperature goes up. So it will say, okay, your temperature is 39 degrees. And then the body will say, okay, it's above 37. Then it will set in motion things that will reduce it back down. That's negative feedback. Like sweating. You start to sweat, and then when the sweat evaporates off your body, you feel cool. And then the temperature kind of comes back down to normal. And then once the brain decides, or the control center decides what to do, it will send it to an effector organ. Okay, like in this case, if you're hot, the effector organ will be what kind of organ? What's that? Okay, remember I said you're sweating. So what would be the effector organ? If you're sweating, what's causing you to sweat? Yeah, sweat glands, yeah. So that would be the effector organ. Sweat glands will be the effector organ. Okay? Because that's the one that sweats and then you feel cool. All right? So you need those three things. Those are the three components you need for the negative feedback that but there are 5 steps in the whole process of homeostasis, right? Including those 3 parts that we just talked about. So receptors will monitor the value, okay, and they are sensitive to certain stimuli or certain changes, like temperature receptors, thermoreceptors, all right? And light receptors, like in the eye, photoreceptors. So each receptor, again, that's the organization part of the body, will be responsible for a certain stimuli or a certain change, so that it specializes in only that one change, and then it will send the information to the brain. All right? Where it is compared to the set point. Okay? Again, variables are anything in the body that changes in quantity or magnitude is a variable. And then, of course, the control center compares the value to the set point, to the ideal value, and then based on what that value is, whether it's below or above normal, then it will set in motion. All right? So the response is necessary to maintain homeostasis. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes if there's a small change, it may not be necessary to initiate homeostatic mechanisms. Remember, the temperature fluctuates. Only homeostatic mechanisms are set in motion when what happens? When the variable does what? No, because it's already moving from the set point, right? And we said it fluctuates in a normal range. So if it goes out of the normal range, see what I'm saying? Remember, we drew a graph like that. So this is 37 degrees C. I keep on using the temperature. So it goes like that. That's the normal range. So from here to there. So if your temperature changes and goes here, are we going to set up homeostatic mechanisms? No. But if your temperature changes and goes here, then we set up homeostatic mechanisms. All right? And that's how the homeostatic mechanism work. Okay? It's just like the thermostat in your home too for the temperature. It kind of fluctuates in a normal, in a range. If you set it at 72, it goes maybe 2 or so degrees above, 2 or so degrees below. All right? And then, of course, an effector will produce the response, in this case, sweat glands. If you're cold, the muscles are the effectors. When you're cold, when your temperature goes down, what happens? You start to shiver. So the effector will be the muscles. All right, so we're going to just give an example of a homeostatic mechanisms that occurs in the body in terms of blood pressure. Okay, in major blood vessels like the aorta, which comes right out of the heart and distributes blood to the rest of the body, there are certain receptors in there called baroreceptors that measure the pressure, the blood pressure. All right, there are also chemoreceptors that measure the chemicals in the blood. All right, so in this case we're using baroreceptors. So there are baroreceptors strategically placed in major arteries that measure the pressure. So if the change in pressure goes up or goes down, okay, let's say in this case the pressure goes down, your blood pressure goes down due to some event or something. And then that information is relayed to the control center. And the control center that does it is the medulla oblongata, is controls heart rate and things like that. So it goes to the medulla oblongata, and then it compares. The blood pressure is supposed to be maybe around 120/70 or something like that. And then it sees that the blood pressure is low, right? And then the effector organ in this case is the heart. So what happens? What do you think will happen to heart rate if your blood pressure is low? The heart rate increases. What happens? What's the answer? I hit 2. Okay. Think about it a little bit. If your blood pressure goes down, what's going to happen to your heart rate? Why? Okay, why does it slow down? It's going to do what? It's going to speed up. It has to speed up, because when it speeds up, it's going to pump more blood. Usually when your blood pressure goes down, what's happened? You're losing blood and the pressure is less. You know how it is? Let's say you've got a balloon like this and you fill it with water. If you keep filling water, what's going to happen? It's going to blow. But if there's little water in there, the balloon doesn't even inflate. So that's what happens to your blood vessels when your blood pressure goes down. They don't even inflate that much because there's less blood in there. Okay? Usually it happens if you get shot after a traumatic injury, like if you get shot and you lose a lot of blood. Then, number one, less blood is going to the heart. So the heart, to set up a homeostatic mechanism to counteract that, it will go faster. It has to. So that it pumps more blood, to take it to the system so that, the pressure can go up a little bit. You see, it's kind of counterintuitive. At first, you see. So that's what happens. So the heart rate goes up. Okay. Only when blood pressure goes up, if your blood pressure is very high, then your heart rate will go down so that it pumps less blood into the system. Because the pressure in the blood vessels is simply a relationship to the amount of blood in the system. That's all. Those are pipes. Your blood vessels are pipes, and if you have got more fluid in those pipes, if you've got more blood in those pipes, then the blood is going to be pushing hard against those walls, and it's going to like they're gonna burst. So the high blood pressure is really bad for you. Okay, and so the heart rate goes up and down. All right. So and then the effector organ will take it back down to normal. All right. Very good. Okay. So and this is just another scenario with blood pressure again. It shows you if blood pressure is going down here, then heart rate goes up. If blood pressure is going up, then heart rate goes down, right? So that you bring it back down to that normal range. All right, all right. So what happens when you're exercising? When you're exercising, you have you create a new normal. Remember, when you're exercising, your heart rate goes up. When you're on a treadmill, you also use those things, the heart monitor, and it shows, how your heart is actually goes faster. All right. So during exercise, you set up a new normal, and that new normal goes up high and up high. All right. And then when you stop exercising, you reestablish the regular normal. All right. So that if you overexert yourself and it's kind of going up here, then the homeostatic mechanisms will try to bring it down to that normal range that you have now created. Or so that's why you should never overexert yourself, because then your heart will be working way too hard. All right. As important as it is to exercise, you shouldn't kill yourself only. All right. Okay. This just showing you. This actually happens in this scenario. Let me show you this. This graph is even better because it shows what's going on. The scenario I want to talk about here is, let's say you've been shot, okay, and your blood pressure is going down. All right. You're losing blood, so your blood pressure is going down. When your blood pressure goes down, that means less blood is going to go back to the heart as well. All right? If less blood goes back to the heart, then it's not going to pump any blood back into the system. So then it becomes a positive feedback effect. So and then the blood pressure keeps going down and down and down. You see what I'm saying? Until you stop the bleeding, and then you have to do what? To reestablish homeostasis. What do you do if you lose blood? You go to the hospital, they do what? They give you a blood transfusion. Because the homeostatic mechanisms will not be enough to bring it back to normal. Like if you lose too much blood. All right? Because it will kind of feed off on itself. The less blood goes to the heart, the less blood is going to be pumped back, and blood pressure keeps going down and down and down and down. Until you actually have a medical intervention where you actually add more blood. All right? So we got this little cartoon here. It's just talking about positive and negative feedback. Oh my God. Am I putting the volume up or down?
The release of gonadotropin-releasing hormone from the hypothalamus and luteinizing hormone from the anterior pituitary. Gonadotropin-releasing hormone also stimulates release of luteinizing hormone from the anterior pituitary. Luteinizing hormone, in turn, causes release of additional estrogen from the ovary. The levels of gonadotropin-releasing hormone and luteinizing hormone increase in the blood due to this positive feedback effect. After ovulation, the corpus luteum is formed in the ovary and begins to secrete progesterone in response to luteinizing hormone. Progesterone inhibits the release of gonadotropin-releasing hormone from the hypothalamus and luteinizing hormone from the anterior pituitary. Blood levels of gonadotropin-releasing hormone and luteinizing hormone decrease because of this negative feedback effect.
This is just showing you the negative and positive feedback effects that go on in the body. All right, and we will cover this when we do the reproductive system, and a little bit of it when we do the endocrine system, because those are the glands of the endocrine system. I think, and I can. Good. Because when it plays, you're gonna touch out. So now we're gonna talk about the body planes and how you can dissect the body in different planes. And this first, everything is in reference to the anatomical position. This is the anatomical position right here, with your palms facing forward. all right? Your head upright and facing forward, all right? Your feet just about slightly apart, okay? I'm going to need you to, of course, know the definition of the anatomical position, all right? Which is your feet, everything facing forward and your palms facing forward like this, and that's it. If you ever want to describe it, think of this and then describe that. Okay? Because that's very important. Because everything that we're going to talk about, all the planes we're going to talk about are in reference to the anatomical position. All right? So, got to know the anatomical position. So, supine, a person is facing upwards. Where's my crayon? Prone, a person is facing down. Is lying face down with your hands like this. Okay? And then supine. Usually when they do surgery, depending on what surgery they're going to be doing, if they're doing abdominal or thoracic surgery, you'll be supine. So the doctor will say you put the patient in a supine position on the, on the bed so that we can do, and then you have to know where the organ that you're going to have surgery on is, and then you isolate only that part and you clean it up real good, all right? And then the surgeon, all he does is come and cut, okay? Yeah, so actually that's what he really does, especially if you do tubal ligation. The doctor will come, an anatomist who knows the anatomy, who has to identify what the the fallopian tube is, the oviduct, and then the surgeon comes and cuts. That way everybody's behind is covered, because if the surgeon comes, he says, and I'm good at cutting stuff and I'm good at doing all that, and so you need somebody to identify the actual organ that needs to be cut. So these are very important positions, because everything is based on the anatomical position. Prone, lying down, usually if you're doing surgery on the back and things like that. So there's the anatomical position right there. All right? So be able to describe it. Talk about all the body parts where they are. Your arms are hanging to the side and palms facing forward. Your head is upright facing forward. All right? And then, of course, supine position, and then prone position. I went through first. Prone position, you're lying face down. All right? All right. And then, so all these directional terms are related to this anatomical position. So if anything is distal, it's in relation to the head. It's further than apart. Like I could say my elbow is proximal compared to my hand, because proximal is closer to the head, distal is far up from the head. Okay, so I want you to start to get to using these terms whenever you're describing body parts and their positions. All right, and then of course superior, if you were really going to talk in anatomical terms, in terms of, you would say your eyes are superior to your nose, and your mouth is inferior to the nose. All right, inferior in terms of position. All right, and then anything to do with cephalic is to do with the head. Anything to do with caudal is to do with the tail end. Most of the bones that we're going to do, some of these terms are going to come in, especially when you start to talk about the body parts and their positions. I'll show you a slide in a little bit. So caudal is the tail end, all right? Ventral, it's in relation to a four-legged animal, all right? A four-legged animal like a cat is on all fours, so ventral is anything below, all right? So ventral is equivalent to anterior, right, for a upright bipedal. Okay. There's a question I would like you to also do that's in the back of your book about critical thinking, that compares these directional terms from a four-legged animal to a two-legged animal. All right. Dorsal means back. Dorsum is a Latin word meaning back. All right, that's in a four-legged animal, so that's dorsal. Dorsal is also equivalent to posterior in an upright animal. Okay, and we know about proximal and distal. Lateral is moving away from the midline. Anything that moves away from the midline is lateral. Anything that moves towards the midline is medial. All right. Okay, so that's that. And then superficial. What is superficial? Yeah, it's surface-wise. It's on the surface. All right. And then, of course, deep is deeper. So, so we're gonna just go through pictures of these planes: superior and inferior, anterior and posterior, right? Which is ventral and dorsal. All right. And then proximal is in relation to the head, you know, and distal. All right. Proximal and distal, and then of course medial towards the center, lateral away from the center. All right. So that's how we should start to use those terms. Get used to using those terms. You know, don't say, oh, the mouth is under the nose. No. Yeah. You know, deep and superficial, of course, towards the outside is superficial, towards the inside is deep. All right, and these are all those directional terms, all in a one slide for you to kind of sort of see. All right, and using those pictures will also help you to kind of visualize what that term means. All right, so you could do that. So this is the one I was talking about, the body parts and regions as well. It's going to be very important, in fact, in the naming of the bones. Okay, and all the body parts are related to each other, like the bones in the head are related to the names of the, like the flat bones in the head, to the names of the lobes of the brain. Like the parietal bone covers the parietal lobe of the brain. All right, those kinds of things. So look at this chart and kind of just sort of acquaint yourself with some of the basic body parts and what they're called. All right, like the axial region is the armpit, things like that. Okay, the patella, kneecap, femur, femoral, from the femur, which is the thigh bone, and we'll be covering some of those bones. Now, this is the regional anatomy diagram I was talking about. All right, I'm going to need you to say what's in the right iliac region, for instance. Okay, right here. The right iliac region is important for what kind of surgery that's kind of common. Appendix. When they want to remove your appendix, they'll ask you to prepare the right iliac region. Iliac coming from the ilium, the bone, of the pelvic girdle. It's the bone that kind of surrounds your reproductive organs. It's the ilium and the ischium and the pubis towards the so it's kind of around, because if you feel it, you can feel your ilium if you do this on your sides. So that's important. So this is the lumbar region, is named after the lumbar vertebrae. The lower back is the lumbar area. So the right lumbar region, you have the colon really. If they're going to do a colonoscopy or whatever, they're going to you need to know what's under each of these quadrants. And the hypochondriac region is up above here, and most of it is the liver. And then the stomach, and this is now talking about the epigastric. It's above. And then the umbilical region, mostly small intestine, and then the hypogastric under the stomach really. And then of course the left iliac region is got the descending limb of the colon. So the ascending limb, because material is coming through here and goes through the ascending colon, the transverse colon, and then the descending colon, going to the rectum. All right. So the rectum is kind of here. This is the bladder. This is kind of the bladder right there. All right. So kind of sort of know these regions and know what organs are in those regions. All right. It's important, of course, for obvious reasons. You need to know. This is kind of like surface anatomy, using it to identify the deeper structures. And then there are certain, technologies we use to identify deeper structures. What are some of those technologies that we use to identify deeper structures? Or to look, CT scan, ultrasound, MRIs, okay, all those things. All right. So now these are the body planes, that dissect the body in certain planes. So we have the sagittal plane that goes along here, that divides the body left and right. Okay, sagittal plane divides the body left and right. And then we got the transverse plane that divides the body to the superior and the inferior parts, right? So I want you to be able to describe these planes, all right? What they do, how do they divide the body? Sagittal, left and right, so it's like cutting right in the middle like that, and you get a mirror image of each other, right? And then, of course, frontal plane, it's kind of also called the coronal plane because of the coronal suture that goes like that. And it divides to the body into anterior and posterior, front and back, right? So in the exam, I want you to be able to define all these terms, all right? And then, of course, these are just the planes in diagram, so you can kind of imagine it, all right? So sagittal plane is not in the middle, is anywhere to the side of the the longitudinal plane of the body, the one that divides it into left and right. Mid sagittal is in the middle, transverse is across, and then of course a coronal, front and back, or posterior and anterior divides the body. And then when we have these long organs like the intestine and so forth, a longitudinal section will dissect it along the longest axis of the body, the longer axis of the body, of that body part, sorry. Okay, so that's that. So that's the longitudinal section. And then we have a transverse section or a cross section to see inside, and it could be at an angle, and then it's oblique, all right, and you have a different view at that, all right. And then of course oblique section and transverse. So and then again, these diagrams help you to visualize that plane, so you can describe it, all right. So now we talk about how the body is compartmentalized, all right. These membranes are called serous membranes, all right. Not serious, or serous membranes, all right. There are also other types of membranes in the body, all right. So serous membranes cover cavities in the body that doesn't open to the outside. It doesn't open to the outside. And then mucous membranes cover which kind of body parts? Can you give me like an example? If I've told you that serous cover body cavities that do not open to the outside, so what are some of the body cavities that open to the outside? Yeah, your respiratory system, the nasal. And the other one, the digestive system. All those are lined by mucous membranes. Okay? Because they open to the outside. In fact, the digestive system is a tube that starts in the mouth, and then if anything is in the digestive system, it's not actually in your body, right? You realize that? You actually have to absorb it first before it's in your body. Because it's just like a tube that goes through your body and comes out like that. It just squiggles around in there, with the small intestine and the large intestine. But if you eat your food, once it's in the stomach, it's not in you yet. It might be looking like it's in you, but it's not, because they open to the outside. All right. So these two. So today we'll focus on this one, because this is the kind of membrane that will. They're called serous membranes. So the thoracic cavity is bounded by the ribs and the diaphragm. Okay, so this is where the respiratory system is located, or the lungs are located. All right. And the serous membranes that cover that are called pleura. Okay. So then there will be two types, and we'll talk about that. The pleura that is in close contact with the actual organs, like the lungs, is the visceral pleura, because viscera means soft internal organs. And then the one that is on the outside, that just covers the cavity, the thoracic cavity, is the parietal. All right. And then there will be fluid between the serous, between the visceral and the parietal. That fluid, you can imagine what it does, right? What does it do, the serous fluid? What do you think it will do? Yeah, it prevents friction. Your lungs, your heart, they're going like this. like that, like this, like that. And if there was not that serous fluid lubricating all that, there will be so much friction. I mean, you run out. There will be so much abrasion. Your lungs will be finished. By the time you're done, you know, they will just keep being eroded and eroded. So those membranes are very important, not only in compartmentalizing the body into a functional unit, right? It's important. Like if I built you a house and I just make one big room of 3,000 square feet, you see, would that be nice? No. Your house is compartmentalized, isn't it? Into the kitchen, you do a specific function in there. Like the thoracic cavity will do the respiration. And then, of course, the dining room, you eat in there. You know, digestive system, which is the abdominal cavity, does all that. You see what I'm saying? So just the same way your house is organized and it's wired, and we were talking about the wiring just a while ago, the body is kind of like that, but the body takes it to a whole new level. It's the most complex machine. In fact, I was reading an article about the brain and how if the brain was to be made into a computer, it would be like 1,000,000 times better than the supercomputer there is. It will be faster. It does a lot of things in a second. The brain is. It's very important. I mean, it's, if the body doesn't amaze you, I don't know what will. Okay, so abdominal cavity, of course, is bounded by the diaphragm and then the abdominal muscles. And it also includes the pelvic cavity. Sometimes they just go to the abdominal pelvic cavity together. But the pelvic cavity will kind of house the reproductive parts. And then, of course, this will house the digestive parts. All right? And it's peritoneal. And I will show you is the kind of membrane, the serous membrane that covers that abdominal cavity. You see what I'm saying? And then the pelvic cavity is also covered by the peritoneal serous membranes. All right? Okay, so those are them. It's basically compartmentalized into areas that have a specific function. That's all the organization we talked about at the beginning. It's got to be well organized. All right? And like I was saying, the membrane, the serous membrane, that is just covering the body cavity or compartmentalizing the body cavity is called the parietal membrane. All right? And then the one serous membrane that is intimately in contact with the actual soft organ is the visceral membrane. All right? Because viscera means soft internal organs. Soft internal organs. Okay? So the visceral layer is in touch with the and this gives a good example. If you take a balloon, you fill it with water, and you put your fist in there, so you're going to have the cavity here containing the fluid, which we said is a lubricant. So the part of the membrane, the part of the balloon, which is, we're calling it the visceral membrane, because it's in close contact with the organ. The organ, it will be the fist here. And then this one on the outside is the parietal membrane. And all the organs are like that. If it's the heart, is the cardiac, the cardiac, the visceral membrane, and also the parietal membrane on the outside. All right? And then between it, fluid that will lubricate. All right? So serous fluid secreted by these serous membranes to do the lubrication. All right? So, and then of course the pericardial cavity as well, which surrounds the heart. Same deal. You got the visceral one, in close contact with the heart, and then of course the parietal layer, which covers the cardiac cavity, all right, where the heart is. All right, and then of course we talked about it. The pleura are the ones for the lungs, and you have the same scenario again with the fluid. And that lubricates those organs as well. Okay, and this picture is just showing you, the pericardium with the visceral and parietal, right? And then the pleura, visceral and parietal as well. And then, of course, the blue part has got the fluid in there. All right. All right. So the peritoneal layer, again, for the digestive system, for the abdominal wall or abdominal cavity, and it also surrounds the pelvic region too. All right. And we will cover this when we do the digestive system. Mesentery is a tissue that holds your intestines in place. Because your intestines are squiggling all over the place in your intestine, so you have the mesentery, you see, which is all this purple, that kind of holds it into some sort of organization. All right? Because you don't want it to kink up, and then what happens when you kink a hose pipe, you know, and then water is not coming out, things are not going through. If you have a blockage and things like that, and things get backed up, it's no good. So they have to be nicely arranged so that things are flowing through nicely. All right? So mesentery do that, kind of organize it, give it some organization. It looks like it's all squiggled up in there, but mesentery will give it some organization so that nothing kinks up or is blocked. And then anything that is behind the peritoneum is a retroperitoneal organ. Okay, like some of these kidneys and so forth are retroperitoneal organs because they're behind the peritoneum. All right? So just know these terms about the body cavities and some of the special, you know, tissues in those body cavities and their purpose, like in the peritoneal cavity, right? And then, of course, the retroperitoneal organs that are behind the peritoneum. All right? And then, again, this is just a picture showing you, you know, the different organs in the abdominal pelvic region. And that's it. All right? So please, if you're having problems signing up, let me know to the Connect. Try and do it today so that by 11 o'clock you can do the LearnSmart module. Thank you, guys. We'll see you in the lab in a little bit.